We are live, right?
Yes.
Greetings and welcome to Baywave Festival Special under Bold Moves Radio. Today we are on episode 2 of the Men's Conference, and we will be having a discussion on GBV and toxic masculinity. I am joined today by Mr. Delis Sinong from Pretoria, who studied econometrics at the University of Johannesburg. We also have a special guest by the name of Dr. Masilu Machawa, who is a doctor by profession and entrepreneur by heart. My dear guest, welcome. Mr. Dennis, please introduce yourself.
Right, good day to you at home, the listeners, and good day to you, the hosts and your team. It's a really great pleasure to be here. My name is Delis Sinong, and I am a football coach or football coordinator, as you might say. So I thank you for the opportunity once again to be here, and I hope it's going to be fun, yeah?
Thank you, Mr. Sinong. You're welcome, and I hope we'll have a fruitful discussion. Dr. Machawa.
Oh, thank you very much. Thank you very much. My name is Masilu Machawa. I'm a qualified medical doctor, currently studying Bachelor of Commerce in Entrepreneurship. I practice as an entrepreneur and also a medical doctor. I do public speaking and health talks as a side thing. So I'm very happy to be a part of this topic, which is something that I'm very passionate about. So I hope we have a fruitful conversation.
And that we shall. One of the best ways to start a conversation is by first breaking down what we will be discussing. It is also important to mention that the only reason we are having such a discussion is because we have an issue that needs to be addressed, right? Starting with, yes. So we'll be starting with toxic masculinity. Can any one of you guys give us a brief into what toxic masculinity is? Dr. Machawa.
All right, thank you for the platform. If I take too long, please feel free to signal me. Yeah. So toxic masculinity, I think if we need to understand it, we need to start by looking at masculinity as a whole. You know, the spectrum which is associated with masculinity. Be able to define what is masculinity, what is femininity, what is healthy masculinity, what is healthy femininity, and the toxic counterparts thereof. So when we talk about masculinity, we're not going to be talking about the gender spectrum, but we are going to be discussing the features of what masculinity entails. So if you look at it from a historic perspective and also a prehistoric perspective, the way we function as organisms, either as human beings, animals, and all that, how we thrive is that we thrive through conquering and also expanding. So we conquer by growth, and then we expand by nurturing and reproducing. And those two things are where masculinity and femininity comes from. So meaning that as a pair, let's say as a person, if we say that we want to grow a head, I mean, we want to grow a group of species, we've got certain roles that are associated with, that are defined as masculinity, and then we've got certain roles that are associated with femininity. And these roles are not gender specific. If you are a man or a woman, you can still have both features. You can still have feminine features, and you can still have masculine features. But then toxic masculinity comes when we have a set of people which in modern terms, the set of people can be classified as cisgender males. This set of people have got, they are aware of their masculine, what do you call it? Masculine features and masculine practices, and also masculine responsibilities, but they do not partake in them in a proper way. So if I'm to say, for example, that some of the features of masculinity involve an ability to lead, an ability to protect, and also an ability to build, you find that these people have features that do not correlate with that. So if, let's say, for example, you have been given a task to lead, instead of using that task to lead, you then use that task to oppress, to practice power. That's not, to practice power in an inappropriate way. You then use that as well to abuse other people. You then use that as well to oppress anyone that's around you. And the root cause of toxic masculinity is usually the psychology, like the psychological makeup of most men, that comes from what we consume and also our history as children. I think it's something that we can get to expatiate a bit more as we talk. Maybe have a discussion on how does media consumption cultivate toxic masculinity, and also how does childhood traumas and upbringing cultivate toxic masculinity. But then a combination of someone being given a masculine role and a poor psychological maturity can lead to toxic masculinity. When you combine the two, that's where we get toxic masculinity. So let me just stop here so that as we talk further, I can give examples as well.
Thank you, Mr. Machawa. I agree with you there. It could also be very difficult to define what toxic masculinity is. One definition that I think I found was that toxic masculinity could be a set of attitudes and ways of behaving that are typically associated with or expected of men, regarded as having a negative impact on men and on society as a whole. However, in my opinion, it is very difficult to define what it is. If it's a matter of transgressing against the boundaries of gender appropriate behavior, then it will indicate that it is something of universal and normative about gender appropriate behavior. Because toxic masculinity, most people view it as the men doing what's wrong or whatever due to their masculinity or masculine behavior. Mr. Sinong, it's Sinong, right? Mr. Sinong, can you take us through on what you think could be the antidote to toxic masculinity?
Yes. Before I get into how to repeat question, please. How to eradicate toxic masculinity? Is that your question?
Yes. Yes. The solution to toxic masculinity. Yeah.
Okay. Before I get into that, I'd just like to extend my appreciation to yourself and Dr. For elaborating on what it means. And I think you guys have very well defined it, because it is important that if we're talking on a subject, we must have a consensus on what it is. Of course now, but this is a terminology which I don't like, and that is how I would like to start with my opening statement before I answer how can we get rid of it. The doctor, what's his name again, doctor, so that I can say his name?
You can call me Masilo.
Yeah, Masilo, right?
Sure.
Yeah, Dr. Masilo, I like your definition about what, and your definition is really good, and it's what toxic masculinity is supposed to be. But and you said something very important there, that if we're going to define something, we have to talk about what do the two words mean independently. So toxicity, I think it's a very general term that everybody is familiar with, and in simplicity, it means poisonous or causing harm. So now masculinity, and that is where the problem comes. Masculinity is attributes that are associated with the characteristic of man, which mean speed, strength, and robustness. So I don't like, although we agree that there is a consensus, what we are going to discuss is how you defined it, and that is what it's supposed to mean. But however, there is nothing toxic about masculinity. I just want to put it out there before we start, that there is nothing toxic about the characteristic of men. Masculinity is just masculinity, in the same way that perhaps technology is just technology. But it is difficult for a man, if he's going to do anything toxic, to leave his masculinity behind in the household and do the crime without his masculinity. But I want to highlight strongly again, gentlemen, I believe it is not the masculinity which is toxic, rather what is done with it. All right, now back to the consensus, just so that I don't lose the viewers. Toxic masculinity, as we have come to agree, is, or rather as we will come to discuss, are the cultural norms of men which are causing harm to society and causing harm to men themselves. So now to your question, Cecil, Mr. Cecil, how can we eradicate toxic masculinity? Right. I think the most fundamental first step to eradicate toxic masculinity is we need to have a level of education. Education is important, and education on the self. So in other words, you need to understand yourself as a human being, what works for you and what does not work for you. And then you need to condition your mind. Sorry. Then right, you need to learn how to condition your mind to work in the favor of yourself, so that you do not bring harm to yourself and the society and whoever is around you. And this means you must not have competition with other people, because that competition with other people will force you to engage in risky behavior and so forth. But of course, let me give you guys a chance. It's going to be a lengthy discussion. There is no need to say everything in one breath. So yes, I'd like to hand back over to.
Thank you. Oh man, you spoke, Mr. Sinong, you spoke about education. Does that would you say that includes self-education?
Yes, of course, because if you want to develop what I'm saying, which is a mental conditioning, in order for you to mentally condition yourself correctly so that you don't bring harm to yourself, you need to have an education about yourself. So yes, you need to know what causes harm to you and what does not cause harm to you. And that comes by experiment, and only you can experiment with your own body. So yes, in a nutshell, or rather, yes, it does include education about the self.
Oh, nice. I thought as much. I wanted to know, would you say it is, this question I posed to both of you, would you say it is advisable for women to develop their masculine traits? Because by the way Dr. Machawa has spoken was that masculinity could be both within males and females. So in efforts to counteract the toxicity of masculinity, would it be advisable for women to develop the masculinity within themselves? Because I believe they are not just feminine, and the toxicity that brings about masculinity being bad is because of a lack of femininity, if I am not wrong there. So would you say that as much as men should have that feminine side, women should have the masculine side to what?
Counter.
To complement, to counter, to complement the whole ratio of men and women and toxicity. And I'm not sure if my question was clear.
Yes, it is absolutely clear, and I take it is directed to me first. Is that right?
Anyhow, yes.
Okay. Yes, I think it is absolutely necessary for women to develop their masculine side, right? But as we have said, masculinity, now we are not talking toxic masculinity. We're talking, must women develop their masculine side? And these are the attributes of strength, speed, and robustness, if you want to call it like that. So it is absolutely necessary because, number one, masculinity built everything that you are looking at. You are sitting on a chair right now. It takes a level of strength to build that chair. You are inside the roof and a house, brick by brick, it had to be made. So if you're going to carry out any task or activity, it's going to need a certain level of strength. It's going to need a certain level of masculinity. So in a short way, I would like to say, yes, definitely it is an absolute necessity that women must develop this characteristic.
Thank you. Mr. Machawa, any additions, subtractions?
All right. Okay, thanks. Can you please just
repeat
repeat that question just a bit? Yeah.
The question was, is it advisable for women to develop their masculinity?
Oh, okay. So here, I think before I can answer this, we can also look at how both myself and Mr. Sinong defined masculinity. I spoke of masculinity from a psychological perspective. He spoke about masculinity from a physical perspective, where he talks about strength, robustness, and then I spoke about the ability to lead and the ability to conquer. These features or from the psychological perspective, these features, these masculinity features are not gender dependent. Remember when I spoke initially, I said that when we discuss masculinity and femininity, we still need to understand the gender spectrum as an entire topic altogether. Then we also understand the psychological makeup of femininity and also masculinity. So I personally think that by default, both men and women have masculine features and feminine features. So the problem with toxic masculinity is that just like toxic femininity, it's something that doesn't come by default to us. It's something that we get to learn over time. We get to learn from the culture that we're exposed to. We get to learn based on the upbringing that we have been exposed to, and also what we consume as adults. So I would say that it's important for, I'm going to answer this by saying that I think it's important for both men and women to recognize and understand that in order for them to achieve balance from a psychological makeup, they need to have both masculine and feminine features, because that's how growth occurs. That's one cannot thrive without the other. So these two features are in a way codependent. Living in a society that then classifies masculinity as a bad thing and femininity as a good thing, without understanding the concept, without understanding the psychological origin of each, without understanding the physical origin of each, or the cultural and spiritual relevance of each. So I would say that as human beings, we need to be people that are capable of embracing both these features, and also understanding how these features affect our mentation, and also understanding how can we as people avoid these features from becoming toxic. And after we have learned that, how do we then pass it on to the younger generations? So I think that by default, we all have feminine and masculine energy. What we need to understand now is control, and also understand the appropriate use of these two psychological makeups.
Thank you. Oh, that's quite a mouthful. I think our audience is getting a lot of advice and clarity on the topic for today. Here is another question. When does masculinity become toxic? The question is posed to both of you.
May I step in, or should I allow Mr. Sinong?
Mr. Sinong,
you can have a go at it, sir.
All right, thank you. So you're saying, how does masculinity become toxic?
Yes.
So
at what point does it become toxic?
Okay, fine. I'm gonna give you an example of something that happens in nature, right? When you look at different kinds of animals, we can talk about all sorts of animals. They all have different roles, right? Male, female, the male does this, the female does this, simply because of their physical features and so forth and so forth. So take, for example, penguins. The females have smaller bodies, and they do not have a lot of fur, and they've got agile muscles. And then the males have got a lot of fur, they've got strength, and they've got bigger muscles that are soft but not tensile, right?
Yeah.
Just before they mate, just before a male penguin mates with a female penguin, what a male penguin does is that it goes around the shore collecting different things, twigs, pebbles, and all that, things that require strength to build a nest, right? The female is incapable of doing that, yet the male is capable of doing that. After creating that thing, after creating the nest, they mate, and then the female lays the egg. The male cannot lay the egg, but then the female can lay the egg, right? And then after the egg has been laid, now the female doesn't have enough fat to keep the egg warm. Remember, they live in places that are extremely cold, but then the male has got a lot of fat to keep the egg warm, right? After that, what's going to happen is that the female has got tensile muscle and a lot of agility. So when it comes to food, the female swims faster than the male. So usually the females are going to leave the male warming the eggs, and then they go underwater and they look for food. So what happens is that as the females look for food, the males stand by the shore and wait for the females to come out. So since the females are extremely fast underwater, they manage to outmaneuver all sorts of predators. We are talking sea lions, sharks, whatever, anything that can eat penguins. And they can catch as many fish as possible in a very short space of time. And then as soon as they get out, some of these animals, like sea lions, are capable of moving a bit just outside the water. But then as soon as they get out, the males are already standing out there and pushing small rocks and all these things. And those things will be falling on top of the sea lions, and then the females will be able to reach the nests with food. If you look at what I described there, I spoke about one species with two biological, one species with two different biological features, and the two were able to use that as a unit, and to propagate the species. You get me? So now,
Yeah.
that's where we talk about unity. That's where we talk about division of activities based on different abilities and different biological makeup. So the same behavior, the same behavioral trait has been happening with mammals as well, including us human beings. So the problem comes here. With human beings, females were usually gatherers, and then males were usually hunters, right? And then we've got females were gatherers because of the fact that they are better when it comes to things like hand-eye coordination, better when it comes to leadership and organizational skills, better when it comes to roles such as nesting, creating a home, and stuff like that. Even when we look at things like core temperatures and all that, they've got higher ones, so they can be able to keep a baby and take care of a baby in this harsh environment and all that. Whereas men had length, had muscles and all that stuff, and they were better when it comes to outmaneuvering predators outside, hunting and finding animals and all that, right? So when we moved from by then, when you look at it from that point, from prehistoric time, the combination sounds like a perfect team, right? But then when we moved from prehistoric human beings to historic human beings, where now we've changed into a more agronomic society. Now we don't need to hunt and do this thing. We can have sheep and everything coming to us. The only thing that happened, was that human beings started fighting for territory instead of human beings just going out and hunting and all that. And then by that time, who was better at fighting for territory between men and women? Men were more equipped to do that than women, right? And that then sort of eradicated the teamwork that comes naturally. Because if you look at us human beings, the difference between us and animals is that we have social evolution, which happens faster than biological evolution. So socially we evolved, but then biologically we were still lagging behind. So during wars and all these things, and people conquering villages and doing all that, those were activities that were done by men. And then from then, that's where issues like patriarchy developed. That's where issues like objectifying women developed. Issues where as a man, I wouldn't see a need to respect a woman if I can simply go and conquer a different village with another group of men, and then we get there, we start raping women and all that stuff. And most women at that time relied on men for protection. They relied on men for food, whereas the system was skewed to an extent where it appeared as if men did not rely on women for anything. And then from then, patriarchy grew from that point, because most cultures, like for example, when we talk about the Eastern culture, the Western culture as well, and also some Middle Eastern cultures as well, most of these things were now honoring a lot of men, simply because men were the ones who were conquering, men were the ones who were also raiding different villages. And then some of the things that they used to do when they reached these places was that they used to indoctrinate people with theories of men being superior than women. And to make sure that those theories remained, they indoctrinated them with using various ways, like cultural practices, like religion, social practices as well. And then that then kept the men appearing as if they are in a level of being a demigod. So the whole thing just spun out of control from that. I mean, if you go to a group of people and then you indoctrinate them using their culture, using their religion, it's quite easy for whatever idea that you plant to grow from then. You see, so from then, that's when I would say that toxic, where I would say patriarchy took its full effect from that historic perspective. And then from then, the whole thing just continued growing. Women are still being objectified today based on our cultures, based on our religion, our social interaction, entertainment, news, everything. And if you look at it, the whole thing developed from an indoctrination that occurred many, many years ago, and it's still continuing. I'm sorry for taking. I'm so sorry for taking. Yeah,
it is absolutely fine. I would like to just stop you right there, because yes, you were saying a lot of things and you're bringing a lot of things into mind, which we wouldn't be able to cover right now. To the viewers, you are still watching Bay Waves Festival special, and we are discussing toxic masculinity. Today, I have with me Dr. Machawa and Mr. Dennis Snow. Moving on to Mr. Snow, in your opinion, what do you think brings about toxic masculinity? Or where does it come in? When does masculinity become toxic? Yes, I think that's the best question. Mr. Snow?
Yes, thank you for your question, Mr. Mavoko. Yeah, it's a nice and easy question, but also complex. As you can see, my colleague there, his answer was also, yeah. So first of all, when we talk about toxic masculinity, then in definition, we are talking about also cultural norms, right? So we have to be very careful how we use this phrase and how we define it, because to a level of an extent, it is a terminology, and we have to be careful with it, because it is the terminology that is and can be used to take away the self-esteem of men and their credibility in society. And also it can be used to undermine the African traditions and religions, and not limited to just Africa, but also other religions, because my colleague, Dr. Mashilo, spoke about these cultural norms. So we have to be careful, because culture is important. Culture is very important, and we must understand that for culture to be culture, it is years and years of experiment, of trial and error, being tested again and again. And finally, we have decided that this is the only thing which will work. And then we say, all right, because this is the only thing will work, this is our culture, right? Okay, now I just wanted to clarify there, because sometimes it can get away from us. Now, how does masculinity become toxic? By definition, again, we spoke that Mr. Mashilo also in his definition spoke about psychological aspect, and I focused more on the physical aspect. And further, I spoke about education and mental conditioning. So now, if your conditioning is in a sense not in your own favor, so in other words, you aim to please friends and you are reckless, you take reckless behavior, because we also spoke about control in the definition, that masculinity is something that is good, but it has to be within certain limits, controlled, and thus you have to be responsible with your masculinity, although it is important that you must develop it. So now, if there is no control and there is not the right education, you will get into unnecessary competitions, and then you will engage in reckless activity, trying to prove people wrong. Like, okay, a pump of adrenaline that you get, and then it becomes toxic to you, because in the end of the day, you will harm yourself because of that high level of masculinity and lack of conditioning. And also now, when it comes to society, it will become toxic to the society, masculinity, because now you want to use your strength and your characteristics psychologically and physically to oppress women, right? Now, if you seek to oppress women with your masculinity, to say, yeah, because, and he highlighted it very well using penguins, Mr. Cecil, I like what he said. And he said, now somebody neglects their responsibility. Do you see? You neglect your responsibility and you use what is meant to be good, and you take it and you don't undertake your responsibility, and instead you use it to oppress, like he spoke as well in indoctrination. You use it to oppress women through cultural indoctrination. Then you are becoming toxic. And of course, women throughout the years, as is used with penguins there, the females have always played a very important role, and which was never recognized, because it was not capitalistic. In other words, you see, we have in some way in the world today, we have forgotten the commerce was created. Commerce was created to serve humanity, but instead it became the other way around. We as the humanity are serving commerce. We are so much concerned about monetary gain, such that because of this focus on commerce and the service to money and capitalism, then women were not recognized. You see, the like he spoke in Penguin, I like it because he used a different species as well. Now somebody in there is not recognized for the good things that they do, because it's not easily publishable. If somebody cooks a meal for the children at home, and the children get to eat and they grow up and they develop and they become strong, versus somebody building an aeroplane, obviously the newspapers is going to be about the aeroplane and not the person who's raising men. Then now you understand. Now when you take advantage of that and use it to oppress somebody else, then that is when masculinity becomes toxic. Yes, sir. I think we've both said a mouthful, so yeah, that is, yeah.
Yeah, you have. I think that the comment section might be ready at this point. I think you have both said a mouthful and you have explained the concepts very well. I think that there will not be any misunderstandings, and we are 40 minutes into the show. Any questions that may rise, Happiness, please come through with them in the next 5 minutes. Yeah, please prepare any questions that we may have in the comment section. And for our viewers in the comment section, thank you for joining us, and we hope that you are getting what you came for. Moving on, I have one more question based on what both of you have highlighted, right? You've spoken about child caring by men, right? And you've also spoken about the transition from old age or back then to modern day life, or how things are in the modern day. My question is, would one be wrong if he said equality has contributed towards, the concept of equality has has contributed towards masculinity being viewed as toxic? Mr. Masilu, we may start with you.
All right. I think to answer that, I would say it depends on who's defining masculinity, right? When we talk about, let's say, for example, we talk about it from a psychological perspective by intellectuals. We use theories that are spoken about by intellectuals versus when we talk about masculinity defined by maybe some online people on Twitter who are just talking without knowing what they're talking about. You know, we would say that masculinity in pop culture, masculinity is viewed as a bad thing because of introducing the aspect of equality. But then from the intellectual perspective, introducing the concept of masculinity doesn't necessarily make, I mean, the concept of equality doesn't necessarily make masculinity look bad. I don't know if I'm making any sense, because for the common man, I mean, for the common human being out there, when you say the word masculinity, they think rape, they think murder, theft, crime, oppression, all those things, because that's what pop culture pushes masculinity to be. But then when we talk about that from a more open-minded and intellectual perspective, when we talk about masculinity, we then start talking about what Mr. Sinong highlighted. We then talk about what I highlighted. So I would say that empowering women is one of the things that I personally support. It's a great thing. In fact, we should reach a point whereby there shouldn't be a need anymore to say, let's empower women. Women should reach a state whereby they are as equally empowered as we are. But then if you understand masculinity from that perspective, from the perspective that both of us gave, I do not think that empowering women or anything that has to do with women should then affect how we behave as men. I think what causes toxic masculinity to develop is the psychological makeup of the man who then feels insecure, the man who then feels inadequate, the man who then feels threatened when they see a woman rising to power. For those, for men who understand what femininity is about and what masculinity is about, we actually rejoice, we actually embrace the idea that women should rise to power, because if you look at it, they've got better skills when it comes to multitasking, better skills when it comes to teaching, better skills when it comes to imparting knowledge and wisdom. So, you know, for a man who doesn't understand, who doesn't have a good psychological standpoint, empowering women is what can cause them to behave in such a way. So yeah, the answer, I'm going to answer this like I'm a lawyer, so it depends. Yeah.
Like a lawyer.
Yeah, it depends.
It depends. Everything depends when you talk about lawyers.
Yeah.
Are there any benefits to men having that feminine side, or how would you describe a man who embraces femininity? If that word is a bit, it doesn't roll off the tongue that easily. Yeah, benefits of femininity within men. Does that help? Okay, of course it helps with eradication of toxic masculinity, right? What I want to understand, and I'm sure our viewers also want to understand, is what exactly is the, of course we can pinpoint what the solution is, or what the antidote towards toxic masculinity is. But if we are to, just to reflect back and just to give them something, what would we, I would like us to go back to the antidote of toxic masculinity. What do you think the antidote of toxic masculinity is? Mr. Snow, can you come in here and help us out?
The antidote of toxic masculinity, I will is almost like I'm repeating, but because we said what causes it, right? And when does it become toxic? And we said it becomes toxic when it becomes uncontrolled. All right. So now the antidote of that is, again, you have to, as men, we need to have a higher level of thinking. And in this higher level of thinking, it means we have to notice for ourselves as intellectual beings, we have to develop our intelligence and try to stay away from unnecessary competition, right? And we need to participate, because men, they are so happy when they're expressing their masculinity. I don't know if you've noticed, if you go to a football game or a rugby match, you will see that men are so happy in that moment in time, because they are given the platform to express their masculinity, and sometimes on football there are rules, yes, but it's almost like you can express on the physical level as much as you like, right? So yes, we need to open up a platform for men to express themselves in some way. Do you understand? To express that masculinity, just get it out the system. Do you understand? Because sometimes keeping it in always at the physical level, keeping it in doesn't work out very well. So it's a good thing we have things like sports where you can go and express yourself at the physical level. And at the psychological level, also we have to learn how to condition the mind to say, I tell myself now, I will not do this behavior. I will not behave like this, and I will not do that. And you tell yourself repeatedly, and you condition yourself. And I think that is, does that answer your question? I hope, Mr. Maboko.
Yeah, I think you have touched on good points. And yes, I think you have touched on good points and have given us an idea of how we can eradicate toxic masculinity. Moving on to GBV, it appears we have no questions in regards to toxic masculinity in the comment section. So I am just going to move on to GBV, gender-based violence. It is my understanding that toxic masculinity can contribute towards GBV. And of course, GBV, there are a variety of gender-based violent actions. Mr. Masilu, can you walk us? I would have liked Mr. Snow to give us the definition or the types of GBV while we're moving into this topic, given that Mr. Masilu has already defined toxic masculinity. If it is okay with you. Yes.
I'm sorry, before Mr. Dr. Matava goes on, I've been raising my hand. It's not showing.
Oh, sorry. Yeah, it's not, it wasn't visible. Thank you.
All right. I must say that this is a very educational conversation. We have Prudence saying that it's very interesting the way Doctor explains using every living being. And there's another one that says, I hear that toxicity is influenced by cultural and societal norms, but I need to know from the good doctor if hormones do play a role as well. And the last one from me, as you know that me, I like being personal. I still feel like the gentlemen are surfing on the surface and giving general comments. Can we move the spotlight to your personal experiences and we hear more about real life toxic masculinity stories? How did you identify and resolve those situations? Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Machaba, I think the questions were directed to you.
Okay, thanks. I only managed to get 2 questions. Do hormones play a role, and also real life stories? I think there was also another question that I missed. Can you please repeat that question? There were 3.
No, it was not a question. It was just a flower. Prudence was saying she likes the way you're explaining using living beings.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. All right. So when we go to, okay, so we're still on toxic masculinity, right? So I'm just going to be a bit quick here. I feel like I missed an opportunity to talk about one question. There was one question that was raised by Mr. Maboko saying, are feminine features beneficial and all toxic masculinity? It's very important for us to learn feminine features. I mean, to be in touch with them. It's not something that we need to learn. It's something that's there by default. It's just unfortunate that we get born into a culture that stops us from embracing that side. I don't know if I'm making any sense. So yes, it's extremely beneficial for one to understand and embrace both their masculine and feminine features and be able to do this thing and be able to use them together in implementing personal growth as a human being, regardless of their gender. So unfortunately, in our current society, where we practice a lot of misogyny, where we practice a lot of patriarchy and all that stuff, we live in a world where masculinity is not defined properly. When you talk to a young boy, having cars, having to women and all that stuff. So one of the ways in which we can be able to say we reverse this process is that both young men and young women, or girls and boys, should be groomed in a way where they understand that they have both these features and they need to embrace them equally. We shouldn't be in a society that still says you know, those type of things. Those are some of the things that when we look at, they just make matters worse. You know, we can't be living in a society where you find a rapper busy rapping while there's a naked woman being objectified.
Yes, Mr. Machaba, you seem to be having some. Mr. Machaba.
Sorry? Yes,
you seem to be having some network issues. It keeps buffering as you speak.
Oh, sorry. No, I was saying that.
Okay, I think we should give Mr. Machaba. We should give a minute to sort out the network thing.
All right.
Yes. Mr. Snow, can you come in and help out as Mr. Machaba is sorting out his network issues?
Yes, I would happily come in, but please specify at this point, because I'm not sure if I must answer the question or...
No, you can go ahead and answer the question.
Can you please repeat the question, sir? Which was posted?
Can you please have the questions again?
Well, it was not really a question, but I was just asking these gentlemen to come in with their own personal experiences and tell us how they identify their toxic masculinity and how they resolved the whole thing.
All right. All right. Mr. Snong, you can go ahead and give us a little bit about your life. This is what they want to hear. They want to know about your life and how you have discovered that you are toxic, or when you have realized that you are toxic.
Yeah, you know, to the listeners, and especially the lady who posed the question, was it happiness? Did I hear correctly?
Yes.
Yeah, it is very difficult to come out and speak of my own personal experiences, even though I don't mind to talk about some of my own personal experiences, but sometimes you have to put in the understanding there that if I'm gonna come on a live social media platform and talk about personal experiences per se, and explicitly so, there are people who are involved in those experiences. Do you understand? Maybe if it involves beating someone or fast driving on the highway, there are people involved in those stories, and without no doubt, they will know that it is a referral to them. And into the mix, we have to consider, are those people comfortable with their stories being aired online? So is very, so in a simple way, it's very difficult, or rather it's not easy to speak of specific life experiences, because you have to consider the people involved in those stories, you understand, and you have to hide their identity. But on a personal level, myself, I sometimes was living unconsciously, do you understand, especially as a growing up in school. Sometimes you live unconsciously, you just go to school and you come back home, and I come from a society where after school somebody go topa mabu mo like yeah, pumaga mumfana, do you know? and then well, why gushisha? And then they just use your aggression. They use your own aggression against yourself, and you get involved into a lot of fights. And you fall victim to things like that and traps like that. Why? Because you are living unconsciously and you haven't conditioned yourself correctly. There's nobody who has educated you to say, listen, man, this is how you need to condition yourself. This is what you must never do, and this is what you must do. And this can destroy your image, and this cannot. Then you understand. Then I bettered myself once I have that understanding, and I learned to condition myself over the years. Yeah, I hope happiness. I have tried to I have tried to answer you a little bit. Yeah.
I think you did. I think you have answered a question quite well. We are an hour into our show. You are watching Bay Waves Radio. We are watching Bay Waves on Bold Moves Radio. We are discussing toxic masculinity, and we'll soon be moving on to GDV. With me today, I have Mr. Snong and Mr. Machaba discussing these two topics. Mr. Machaba, what they want to know from the comment section is when did you realize that you were toxic, or your masculinity was toxic? They want to know when you realize. They just want to know your personal experience with toxic masculinity.
All right. Okay, so personal experience with toxic masculinity. And okay, just before I answer that, let me answer this question: do hormones play a role? The answer is no. It's all about conditioning and what culture has done to us. You know, it's all about what patriarchy has done to us and the effects thereof, which I feel like it's a long conversation that we need to discuss. But then I do not think hormones play a role in
toxic masculinity.
Yeah, while he cut there, I would like to say I think they do.
The things that one of the things that I've seen, one of the things that I have personally experienced growing up as a young man is that one of the examples was stated by Mr. Sinong, where, you know, being a boy, automatically you are encouraged to have aggressive behavior. You are encouraged to say, this is what I'm supposed to do. You know, I'm supposed to be able to fight. I'm supposed to bully others, you know, those type of things. And those are some of the things that even myself, I used to act on that. But the biggest issue that always remained was that as much as growing up as a boy who's about to become a man, as much as I always believed that I must not embrace my emotional side, I must not embrace my feminine side, I still continued to act the opposite way, although naturally sometimes I would feel like, no, this time around I need to cry. This time around I need to talk about my feelings. Excuse me. This time around I need to just to not solve this issue in an aggressive way. You see, excuse me. I still continued to act in a way that appeared to be toxic. So one of the places where I got to see toxic masculinity being a practice, and where I also took part in, was mostly when I was in medical school. You know, medical school is a very male. The medical field actually is a very male-dominated place. You see, so we've got certain things like orthopedics. You know, just a lot of things. Not to waste your time, a lot of things where you will be told straight that, okay, this is something that a woman is not expected to do. A woman cannot do this. This is something that only a man can do. This is and being young and malleable at that time, it was quite easy for me to adapt to that culture until I reached a point where I met different women who actually proved to me that no, mentation, skill, and also leadership doesn't depend on your gender. You know, so those type of things, like those are some of the scenarios that without wasting a lot of time, those are some of the scenarios that I would say were an eye-opener for me, where I got to realize that there is something called patriarchy, there is something called toxic masculinity, and I am someone who's unfortunately practicing it as well. You know, we look at the type of music that we consume, listening to hip hop and all that stuff, where we encourage the objectifying of women. We might think that's an innocent thing, but then at the end of the day, that is still practicing toxic masculinity. So yeah, there's a lot of example, but then you know, some of the things we'll talk about over tea some other time. Yeah.
Yeah, I think we got the idea that Mr. Snow, you were disagreeing just now. You were disagreeing with the gender contributing. Is it genetics?
No, genetics? Yeah, hormones. She said hormones.
Yes. Hormones.
Yes.
Disagreeing with.
So
yes.
Yes. Of course, I'm not the expert in the medical field, but my opinion is that there are certain dosages of hormone which are associated with certain behavioral patterns. For example, being a football coach, I'm very passionate about the development of the youth. So, and I observe after practice as well that because there was so much, I don't know how to do it, but the boys were expressing aggression and whatnot. And it has to do with an adrenaline pump, you understand? And adrenaline is a hormone which is very closely associated with aggression. And people in the gym also consume adrenaline shots. And I can tell you, there is a higher likelihood that somebody who has just consumed an adrenaline shot will fight back at you if you try to pick the fight, rather than when he's not under that influence. So that would mean, in some way, somehow, hormones do contribute to our actions, or perhaps what the young boys do these days, because sometimes young boys feel rejected from the society, and they go home and they play video games and they watch pornography, and that pornography is associated with a high level of it triggers the pleasure centers, like drugs, similar to drugs, and you get hormones like dopamine in your system. And because of this high level of hormones, and just to go a little bit off ramp, but we will land the jet. I was listening to a song by Katie Melua, and the song seeks to highlight that that the line between madness and sanity is as thin as a spider's web. So when you have a high level of these hormones in a certain way, adrenaline mixed with dopamine, which triggers the pleasure centers and excitement, the same hormone that you get when you consume drugs or pornography. Now, and you will see somebody can be triggered. And once you are triggered, the hormones react. And then you do what you go a little bit. They say, I was mad, I was mad at it. That means somehow you went to the other side. And once the hormonal balances start to come down, because the body always comes into what we call homeostasis. It's like a balance of the hormones. So the body will always react negatively to different extremes. So in other words, if you have a high level of adrenaline, the body will try to tune that and calm it down. Now, the person say, I was mad, maybe because he was also drunk, and alcohol also triggers the release of hormones. And he said, I was mad, but once homeostasis start to take place and it come down, the hormones become balanced. And then now he's in a state whereby he can be reasoned with a lot much better. So yes, I think in that way we can say, if there is a great association with certain high levels of hormones and what we call bad behavior, then surely I would like to believe that these hormones in some way do contribute to that behavior.
All right. That is a mouthful, and that is very clear. And yeah, you've said a lot. Some I agree, some I disagree, but I'm not here to disagree. I'm here to have the conversation and let it move forward. So you have touched on a bunch of things, and now that we'll be moving into GBV, while you still have the mic, Mr. Snow, can you please walk us through what GBV is?
Gender-based violence, in the full, obviously there's a full word, and it's GBV stands for gender-based violence. I personally think it is a harmful behavior targeted towards a certain gender group, and sometimes just because it is of that gender group, I'm just gonna abuse him, he's gay, I'm just gonna abuse, he's a woman, or I'm just gonna abuse him, he's a man. So I think it's like violence that is targeted towards a certain group, and primarily because they are that group, and maybe you dislike that group or for whatever your reasons. But yes, that is what it means to me, sir.
Thank you. You are very short and very clear. Thank you. Mr. Machawa, gender-based violence. What are your thoughts? What do you think gender-based violence is? Walk us through that, please.
Okay. I think Mr. Sinong gave a very brief and effective definition on gender-based violence. So there's not much I can say after he spoke. And then he also used the Professor Lumumba accent. So there's no way I can say anything better than that. So I love the definition. It's spot on. Yeah,
it's precise, right? Yeah.
Yeah.
What makes, while we were talking about toxic masculinity, you spoke about how children were raised or how the boy child was raised, or to say the boy crisis or whatever. Yeah, the boy crisis. So would you say that the manner in which boys were raised contributes towards them being abusive towards women and those groups that are discriminated against or find themselves, or those groups of people that find themselves being victims of gender-based violence? Upbringing. Let's talk about the upbringing of men and why they become abusive. Why either it be sexually, it be verbally, it be however. Can you guys?
Yeah, can I take that?
Please.
Can I jump on it first?
Yes.
Yeah, he's been answering first too many times. So, I want to relieve him of that. You know, sometimes it's nice because if the colleague answer first, you get to collect your thoughts a little bit. So, if he's answering first all the time, he's a little bit, yeah. So let me try to go first. Not only because of that reason, but because I like the question as well. Yeah. So
thank you.
So yes. How I would like to tackle this one is to say the way that boys are raised. So boys are raised with a certain level of perception, and as he said, some of these perceptions may be toxic or not. But the atmosphere which we grow up in. So I can tell you, we as boys, we are told,
yes, of course.
Yeah. Wa bona monna gesho ge re golane ba tlo go botsa gore monna go ka se bele bana re tlo ja mogogodi ge re go boloka, and then re tsentse ka mo fatshe mo, and when we bury you, re tlo go shukela your casket, you are going to put it on the side. You understand? And they tell you that you must have a family, you must have children, because this is important for the continuity of the family and for continuity in general. And because of that, you find yourself in a state whereby you have to have a wife and you have to have kids. You know, they kind of bring that okay, at the age of 7, right? What I was listening to the other day is at the age of 7, there's a certain part in the brain which is what we call theta, and this is findings by Dr. Bruce Lipton. If you are a viewer listening and you want to know more, just go to YouTube or Google Scholar and Google and find out Dr. Bruce Lipton. Now, Dr. Bruce Lipton came up with a theory that suggests that for a child who is 7 years old, there is a theta which develops in the mind. Now, this part of the brain is responsible for the programming of the child. So whatever information that you feed the child at the age of 7, he will, whether being a girl or a boy, yeah, he or she will put that in the program of themselves. So it will become a something that is how they identify themselves. You understand? We have identities, and they identify themselves with what they are fed, especially between the age of 6 and 7. So as parents, we need to be very careful what we feed our children, especially at that age, because that goes into their conditioning. And more times than not, they will become like that when they grow up. Okay, so now what they feed you at the age of 7 and beyond contributes to the person you become, definitely. Now, and sometimes you are given this thing of maybe you cannot fail in the relationship, or you have to have kids and you have to have this and you must have that, right? And the woman also goes through the same conditioning whereby she's given dolls to play with at the age of 7. So they're trying to get the girl child in some way to become very fond of children. They get them teddy bears and towels to put on the backs. So you understand, they become in some way, they program, they kind of give you that program, right? Now, and when I grew up now, because I said we must talk personal experience. When I grew up, my mother was dodira bogobe. So, and that is pub for those pub. Yeah. So, gizore drive I want maramunna gashu ke rata bogobe wa ke pompa wa lo jam. Kura zaro go bogobe wa mabele o shiba ka meno twana hore how delicious that can be, you know.
African cuisine.
Yeah, exactly. And then there was another theory by Sigmund Freud, and Sigmund Freud seeks to suggest that boys in some way they have or even girls. Sorry, I like talking about boys because sometimes I make the research and it's biased because I'm a man and I want to find out more about myself as well. So, but both of us, male and female, we are when we grow up, we become attracted to, we associate our parents with a good husband or a good wife. And this is the analysis by, or the findings and suggestions by this Sigmund Freud. And you will find when a man goes to look for a wife, or a wife or a woman goes to look for a husband, she will most likely look for a husband which symbolizes the father. And when you are a boy child, you will most likely look for a wife which symbolizes your mother in some way. If your mother were a somehow don't want a girlfriend there with rata, you understand? So and now you, because you have associated your mom and the dress code and the way she behaves with something good. And this is also true for women. There are good fathers out there, and they and these ladies admire their fathers, so they will look for their father in you, right? So now comes the problem of a potential conflict, what we call, because the expectation of the woman is that you will be in a certain way. And as the man, there is a certain expectation for the woman to also be in a certain way because of my association with her. So, and then you can find out, Duri, this person, for example, being a woman. And not, as I've mentioned, so, or maybe she likes to go on a shopping spree and like to spend money recklessly. Or myself, I like to go on a shopping spree, and she's very conservative with money. You understand? Maybe I like to buy a lot of alcohol, and it's an example. Please don't say but yeah. So yes, now is what this state now is a state of potential conflict. So you have two different people who have some certain ideas, different ideas. You understand? Nagi expect the rodla biabawe, you now expect the rodla lalaka pizza. And we are subjected, or we are bound to share the same space. Why bon? Now, once we share the same space, and maybe the Rafat and Seth and whatever, and we have children, and I come home from work and I want to go to the I feel like go ke ho jalo gore a se a bya bogobe o regular
Mr. Snow,
pizza. Yeah.
if I may step in a bit, we are 1 hour and 30 minutes into the show. To our viewers, you are still watching Bay Waves. We are still discussing we discussed toxic masculinity, and we have now moved on to gender-based violence. With me, as I'm still here with Mr. Snow and Mr. Machaba, and in the next 25 minutes, our comment section will be closing. Mr. Snow, thank you for. I think we should now give Mr. Masuli an opportunity to.
I was just at the climax. Can I have one more minute, please? I was just at the conclusion part. Yeah. So as I was saying, because I was raised in this way, because the question is, does the way I was raised contribute to gender-based violence? So I was raised this way, right? Regularly pizza, little McDonald's, and then Gary, pizza, do you understand? And by doing that, you have now insulted your partner, right? And she's going to also send it backwards. And when the girls, when they grow up, there is a toxic trait about ladies as well that we don't like to talk about because for some reason. But anyway, they are very good to destroy the image of the person, and the way that they are built, their aggression comes out through words rather than us men through physical action, right? So now you stating that argument and comparing her to your mother, you have created a platform whereby you are going to have an exchange of words, and perhaps in a domain which is very good at, better than you. Not that you are not good as well at destroying image. Now you are going to have what? The conflict begins. So that is now violence, right? And how did it start? Because of the way you are raised and the expectations you have, and her expectations as well. Maybe Luana, you like to drink alcohol, and she says, yeah, you are always drinking here, and my father would never be drinking. What kind of a man are you? And yeah, so okay, I think I have tried to touch the question. That
no, you've touched it quite well. I think you have given us the real life experience of our viewers, what they actually go through, and what brings about gender-based violence in their everyday lives. Happiness, I am acknowledging you now. I'm assuming you have questions for us.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Maboko. I just want to encourage Mr. Sinong to call a spade, because the ladies are gonna call you out in the ladies' conference. So whatever toxic trait that you're talking about, please tell us so that we can work on ourselves. So there's a question in the comment section from Tarulo Mashahomu. She is saying, I want to know if it's true women trigger men to be violent towards them, or is it just a defensive excuse male use after abusing us? Let me just repeat it. I want to know if it's true women trigger men to be violent towards them, or is it just a defensive excuse male use after abusing us? That's all. Thank you.
Thank you, Happiness. Mr. Machawa, it seemed like you have been wanting to jump in for a minute there. This is your opportunity to jump in.
All right. Okay, thank you for the platform. So it's the question was, do women trigger men to physically abuse them, right? I think it's something that I can answer when I talk about the upbringing. How does upbringing contribute towards this thing, towards gender-based violence? So, sorry, please just hold a bit.
Okay, while we hold for Mr. Machawa, I have a few questions of my own. Would you say the lack of a male figure in the household contributes towards them being aggressive in relationships?
Okay.
And
100%.
Come again?
I said 100% contributes, yes.
All right.
And,
All right. And
finish off the question, please.
Yeah,
all
I'm
right.
back.
And the last question will be, which both of my questions you guys will be sharing, right? So that the audience can get a full idea of gender-based violence and all that. Yes. Would you say that the lack of rough and tumble also contributes towards men not knowing how to act in their relationships and therefore acting abusively, not just to their women, but to their children as well, because they did not learn, the basics of rough and tumble? Mr. Masilu, you can start with the questions posed in the comment section.
Okay. So the list of questions here are the upbringing, do women trigger men, lack of male figure, and also the lack of rough and tumble, right? That's the list, just to sum up. Okay, so let me start off with the upbringing, right? When you look at how boys are brought up versus how girls are brought up in our society, due to culture, due to religion, and also due to societal norms like mass media, social media, and etc., entertainment, and etc. We've got different ways in which people are brought up and different expectations. So gender-based violence or just domestic abuse in general is a very multifactorial thing that occurs because of upbringing. Upbringing plays a very vital role. So when we talk about boys, issues that contribute to them growing up to become abusive, we talk about living in a society that accepts and encourages the objectification of women, where boys from an early age are exposed to various kinds of pornographic material that is accepted by society, such as things like social media, music that the kids are listening to in terms of the lyrics, the pictures, and all that stuff, the movies, objectifying, not only being limited to that, but going further to say that a man can view a woman as a sexual object, a man can view a woman as a prize, and that is completely accepted. We also have another factor where we talk about a man being defined by hardship, a man being defined by features where they are supposed to be tough, macho, strong, and all those things. I mean, personally, I lift a lot of weights, but that after I lift weights, I can still go and listen to Daniel Caesar's R&B and cry. I can do that. I'm proud to say that I can do that. But then when you look at society, when you look at what a man is defined as, if I'm supposed to be a real man, I'm only supposed to lift weights. I'm not supposed to listen to neo soul and become emotional, you see. And then we talk about lack of emotions, like expressing certain types of emotions, such as fear, such as sadness, such as endearment, all these good positive emotions that society has been saying that these are emotions that are attributed only to women. Young boys have not been given the opportunity to embrace those emotions, and we see that from our cultural perspective. When you go to places like initiation schools, those are the things that you are taught to have as a man. You are not supposed to embrace pain. You are not supposed to say that today I'm feeling down. I just want to sit down and have ice cream the entire day and watch romantic movies because I miss my wife or something like. You're not allowed to do that. You are not a man if you do that. And unfortunately, that has a psychological impact on you. Like in a long term, you end up reaching a state whereby you are unable to express yourself, and the only thing that you resort to in most cases becomes violence, which is also encouraged during that stage of your life. And then you grow into that as time goes. Another thing will come from a religious perspective. Most South Africans have adopted the Christianity and also the Islamic route as their religion. And if you look at them, those practices, those religious practices, also encourage the idea that a man is a leader, a man is a head, a woman is supposed to be a companion, she's supposed to be a servant, and all that stuff. You know, we talk about Adam being the first person to be created, and then God saw that he needs a companion, and then he created Eve out of the rib. Already from Genesis, we can already see that there's a lot of women discrimination. I'm sorry to sound like I'm against anyone's religion, but then those are just examples that I'm just trying to put out there. Also, another factor will be men being taught by both culture, religion, and also society, being taught to be unable to accept other people, other kinds of men, other kinds of women. For example, I remember there was an instant whereby I was at town. I went to one of these social events. I have got a friend of mine who's a homosexual that I grew up with. So we spent a while without seeing each other. So after something like 3 years, he says to me, "Hey man, I'm around." I said, "Oh, okay, fine, let's meet up." So we meet up, and then that day he decided to express himself by wearing a dress. So he was dressed completely like a woman. So most people did see me with the guy. We had a couple of drinks, and we ate, and then after that, we left. So most people after that started questioning me and saying things like, "Hey, what's going on with you?" So the inability to accept also plays a very serious role in that. And that doesn't go only on sexuality, but also other attributes that we have. To say that a light-skinned man is not man enough, a short man is not man enough, a thin man is not man enough, a man who has a male pattern baldness is not man enough. A man who doesn't have a deep voice is not man enough. You see, it creates a culture of inability to tolerate. In fact, it creates a culture of an inability to accept differences from other people. And then, mind you, now the other thing again that also in boys that also contributes during a boy's upbringing, we're talking about lack of impulse control. Mr. Sinong gave an example about that thing where you are just walking around with your friend, someone shows up holding the sand like this, and then they say, the moment, if you are someone who's going to say, "I'm going to be a well-composed gentleman, I'm not going to do this," you are already not qualifying as a man. As a man, you are supposed to do that so that you can show your manhood, so that you can fight, you can prove your strength, you get me, and gain validity, social validity in society as a man. And then finally, we also have irrational gender roles, like for example, you find that in a household where we've got both a boy and a girl, and then a boy decides to spill maybe juice on the floor, then the parents say to the boy, "No, you see, already it shows that it already gives the boy an impression that this other one, my sister, is less of a person than me. And also the culture of saying that men should be people who are dependable and not women it also gives the same impression that is given by religion, which says that a man is a head. You see, it gives you the ability, it gives you that impression that you are supposed to take care of this person. You are in charge of this person. Therefore, you own this person. You see, so imagine all these things that I've just mentioned, like the cocktail that I've just created is a cocktail that is being created on young boys who cannot think for themselves, young boys who are not matured enough to look at these things and say, this is not how I'm supposed to behave. You get me? So the lack of a male figure in a household, or the availability of a male figure in a household, can contribute to a man becoming this way. So if you have a male figure who preaches these things, who practices these things, the boy will grow up as exactly those things that I mentioned. And also the girl will also grow up thinking that a man is supposed to be those things that I mentioned, right? Then now let's go to the female side now on this cocktail. So with girls, you find that when they are still young, they are taught dependency. They are taught that you are supposed to have you are supposed to look clean, learn how to clean the house, do your hair properly, look this way, use this thing, use whatever, bio oil, whatever, all these things, lose weight, do this, do that, bleach your skin, so that one day you can find a rich, successful lawyer to come and marry you. And you can depend on him for the rest of your life. I'm going to be making a lot of lawyer jokes, Mr. Babok. So, yeah, so you see something like that. And then it then make a lot of girls grow up lacking that ability to say that I'm also capable of becoming a lawyer. I'm also capable of becoming an engineer. They grow up thinking that, no, lawyers are supposed to be men, and I am supposed to depend on this man. And this man is supposed to cater for me, is supposed to be in charge of me, you see. And also, furthermore, girls, the same girl will be taught issues like perseverance in marriage and everything else. So when we are in an abusive relationship, let's say I decide to get married to a woman now, and then we start fighting. When a woman goes home crying at night, maybe she runs away, she's crying, the first thing that happens is that the family, both the mother, the father, the uncles, everyone, will be putting shame to her. They'll be telling her that, why are you coming back? There's even a term in Venda called Mbuya Buhazi. It's a very insulting term that's given to women that are from failed marriages. And you find that with men, that doesn't apply. Whenever something happens in culture, in most religions, like Islamic religions, Christian religions, African religions, many religions. If, let's say, for example, we are to practice adultery now, I'm to practice adultery with a woman, the person who gets stoned is a woman, not a man. You get me? Mm-hmm. So that brings up double standards in culture. And also, the last thing is that we are also in society that declines women the freedom to express their sexuality, the freedom to express, because culture says that sex is something that's supposed to be enjoyed by men, and sexuality is something that's supposed to be enjoyed by men. But then women are not given the opportunity to enjoy that. Women are not given the opportunity to embrace their sexuality, to celebrate their sexuality. You see, I can freely go.
While you're still there, Mr.
Yeah.
Masood, while you're still there, I would like to jump in for a minute.
Yes.
Happiness, I'll be closing the comment section now. If you have any questions, please bring them up. Are there any questions, Happiness?
No, Mr. Maboko. There are no questions.
Thank you. I would like to reflect for a minute on what Mr. Snung spoke about. That, spoke about porn, right? And then I would also like us to take note that women participate in this as well. So, at what point does, displeasure during sexual intercourse become a problem and thus leading to GBV? That's my question. At what point does you not getting it lead to GBV as a man? Explain it, give it to me as a man. What is it that makes men want to, force themselves upon women?
Let me just try a little bit there. It's a very difficult question to answer, but we like the question. It's difficult because this means you have to get into the minds of the other man and think what runs in their mind, and that's what makes it quite a difficult question. But there was a question that says, does the absence of a father figure contribute to violence and not knowing how to handle this situation? And to answer that question, we can answer that one and the one you've just posed simultaneously. And the presence of a father figure teaches you in many ways how to stay away from violence, because number one, your father teaches you how to deal with rejection. To understand, and I believe that it can be very difficult for a woman to raise a boy child, and you can teach him many things, but there are some certain elements that only the father can teach, and thus it makes it necessary for the father to be present in the upbringing of a child. Why? Because your father will criticize you, and your father will train you how to deal with rejection. Do you understand? If you come from a football match, the women will, I talk about myself. My mother was so praisal of me. She always say, "Wow, my son, well done. It's good," and the whole team as well is praising me. Do you understand? But my father is able to say, "No, no, no. Listen, son, you are a good player, yes, but you can improve on this element. You can improve on this element, and you are not good enough. You understand? You are not good enough to play at the level which I'm expecting you to. So let's go and work on it, so that when you come back to the field tomorrow, you can show those things and be more excellent than what you are." Do you understand? So now in helping you, do you understand? This is in some way sort of a rejection, because your mom just gives you everything you want. You want ice cream, women naturally will just say have it, but your dad will say no. You see, and you have to now get used to it. That's what I talk about when you are 7 years old, the mental conditioning. Now you are conditioned that rejection is a possibility in your life because of your father. And this is something men are very good at. So now I think that is what happens when there is displeasure in the sexual relationship. And I talk about potential conflict, or preconceived conflict. But potentially you will have a certain level of expectation of the woman to perform in a certain way in bed. And when she doesn't, it comes as a shock. So you need to raise your imagination to imagine that this can happen, and your father teaches you that how to have a better imagination for rejection. And now, yes, sir.
I'm sorry for cutting you. It seems that we are running out of time, so I would like us to just quickly, whatever we're saying, just quickly wrap up on it, just bits and pieces. Yes. Here is a scenario. You as a man have been molested. You as a man have been abused by your woman first thing first, what do you do? Quick question.
When you have been,
I would like to give you 1 minute each. Yes.
okay, you can start with Dr. Mashilo, please.
If
He's
if
been
you've
very
been
quiet.
if you've been molested by your woman.
Molested, I assume the term molestation means that you've been molested by a man. But however, if you've been raped by,
Yeah.
I hope I'm not wrong. Yeah. If you are a man right now, you've been raped. What do you do?
I would say,
You have 1 minute.
yeah, I would say that ideally, you are supposed to report the case the same way a woman reports the case when they have been raped by a man. So it's just unfortunate that we live in a society that doesn't really believe that a man can be raped or sexually abused in any other way. But then if we lived in a perfect world, I would say that the thing that you do should be to report that woman.
So here you are. It's not an ideal situation, and
I think I lost you there. You said it's not an ideal situation.
Yes.
I think you cut.
Yeah, you were cut. Yeah.
Oh, okay. My question was, you are raped. It's not an ideal situation. The world is what it is. And now, what do you do? Let us take into account the ego. Let us take into account the social and economic situation. Let us take into account the real world. You as a man, you as Masili, you as Mr. Snow have been raped. What do you do?
It is a very difficult to come up with a conclusion, but I will come up with a conclusion. But I would like to walk you through it a bit. Is that
1 minute? You have less than 1 minute.
Yeah, at 53, I suppose. So the men have been so criticized in our society that it becomes so difficult to tell the police or anybody, because they will laugh at you. So I think now you have to be a little bit more strategic, and you have to talk to somebody, a friend that you trust, who has a conscious mind and dealing you and in helping you out to deal with the problem. It depends who you are raped by. If it's your friend, then you need to go as far away as possible as that friend. But if he's a stranger, then you have to, then it becomes a really bigger problem now, because you can't run away because you don't know how they found you. So the best thing to do, talk to somebody with a conscious mind, and together go to the police and report, and also seek psychological help from a psychologist or professional. Yeah, I have more to say, but of course, time. Yeah.
Mr. Masili, the 1 minute comes to you now. It's not an ideal situation. I would like to emphasize on that. It is the world as it is, and you have been raped.
Yeah.
Or here's the better one. You've been beaten up by your wife.
Yeah. Okay.
What do you do?
Yeah. Can I go back to the one where you talk about sexual abuse rather than rape? I mean, rather than being beaten up.
Being abused, yes.
Okay. Yeah, I think this I can relate to more than being beaten up by a woman. So in a world where we live in today, right? There was a scenario that once occurred to me at some point. So when I was still a junior medical doctor, we used to stay in these places where you find that you have a bachelor's flat next to another person who has a bachelor's flat, and so forth and so forth. Yes. So what happened was that one of the people that were staying in that complex threw a party, hosted a party, invited a lot of girls. So I was at my place. I just went there just to say hi and everything, and then I left, went to my place. I just closed the door and I slept. So what happened during that night was that somewhere around 3 a.m., I felt someone touching me, and then I woke up. When I woke up, there's this girl. I've never seen her before. I do not know her. I do not even know her name. She had a hand on my inner thigh, right? And I started asking, what's happening? What's going on? You know, then she tried to force herself on me. And then luckily enough, I was strong enough to push her away. And then trying to go for psychological help and trying to go for all sorts of help that we all mention. To be honest with you, no one ever took this thing seriously. Not even a psychologist, not even a cop, not even people who were in charge of our residents and all these things. The answer that I kept on getting from people was that you've just been offered free lunch. Why did you reject it? That's the most painful answer I remember from all the answers that I had. So in the world that we live in today, I think we are still very far from reaching a point where men can be able to openly talk about these things and report these things. But then in an ideal world, psychological help and also letting justice take over would really help.
Thank you. Thank you. I think you have summed it up quite nicely. Closing statements. Just say your bit, like a little bit, whatever you want to say, any advice you have. 1 minute each. Mr. Snow, I'll give it to you first. We have like 4 minutes left. Any advice you have for the young men out there?
Yeah, thank you for having me, number one. In case my time runs out, I got that out the way. The advice I would like to give to people is you have to start to become conscious, notice your space, your surrounding, and learn more about yourself, right? Now, and you have to take it upon yourself to find out what is conflict management. So go, whatever you can get on your hands, go Google what is conflict management and how can I best resolve conflict, right? And because what we are talking here is primarily conflict. So please go find out how to resolve conflict.
Thank you. Mr. Masilu, 1 minute. Any advice? Anything you'd like to say?
All right. Thank you very much for having me. My advice to everyone would be that please seek out a lot of knowledge. It's always important to keep learning. Learn about yourself, learn about culture, learn about others, learn about your surrounding. Always keep empowering yourself at any cost. And yeah, stay holistic, take care of your body, your mind, and your soul. And yeah, eat veggies, people, eat veggies.
Yeah, that's healthy diet.
Thank you. So, ladies and gentlemen, there you have it. This is the end of the men's conference, and your advice for the night is consciousness, conflict management, and keep learning. My advice from me would be stay a responsible young man. Thank you, and yeah, I think.
Thank you.
Thanks for having us. Bye.
Don't forget to tell them to tune in again on Tuesday at 7 p.m.
Yes, like Happiness just said right now, tune in next week, same time, same place, 7 p.m. Women's Conference is still continuing. Gentlemen, please join the comment section and ask those very difficult questions. They need to start answering now. So yeah, for tonight's show, thank you. Thank you for joining us. Mr. Masilu, it was nice having you. Mr. Snow, it was Nice having you, and I enjoyed the conversation tonight.